Welcome back everyone with another Unity tutorial. So in this tutorial we will learn some basic for loops and learn how to move our player with a simple script. So for let's go to our testing script which we made. So I am in here in at the script. Let's just remove all of this. So we remove this quickly. So a for loop is basically a loop which will continue to run and for a certain amount of time. For example, it will run for 10 times. It is useful if you want to print something multiple times or perform a task multiple times, such as I want to send a debug.log 10 times. Now now to send a debug.log I can just simply go in here and just say hi in the debug.log, and I can just copy paste it 10 times, and this will achieve the same effect. Let's say so now if we go to the console and see, it should print the debug.log 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 times. So let's see on a console window. Let's hit play and let it load. And yes, it printed a high 7 times, which is our debug.log. So this is one way to do it, but another much efficient way to do is for use for loops. So using for loops can make our code much clean, and can easily do complex tasks from assigning components and everything else. So how do we create a for loop? So to create a for loop we need to write for, and then you can just hit the tab key on your component on your keyboard, I mean, and then it will generate a for loop. You of course you can write this manually. So if you want to write this manually, int I equals to 0, so we are initializing this I variable. I is a integer variable which is 0. I less than whatever number you want the I to be less to. For example, we can create an integer number of let's say, let's just name it times 2 run equals to 7. So this variable has the value of 7, and if we enter number times to run in this, that's totally fine as well. And these are the two conditions, and uh, and the third condition will be we will add one to the for loop. So if the for loop gets run, we will add, and we will add it. So next step will be I plus plus. Oops. I plus plus, and here we will add the I, or and here I need to put a semicolon. I mistakenly placed this, and that's why it was giving error. And that's how you can manually write a for loop. Of course you can replace the I with something else, such as run. I can put run, I can put any name I want, but then I also have to replace this I with run, and it will completely be fine. So these are two ways to create for loops. So now first let's see how it will work. It will make I equals to 0, and as long as I is less than 10, it will initiate the code in this inside these curly brackets, and when it runs the code, it will make I a plus plus. So I will be, so when this code runs, I will be 1. So it will basically run 10 times before shutting down. So now if we go back right over Unity editor and see, let me delete this, let it compile for some time, and now we hit, if we hit play, we should see the code run 10 times. So let's see it. Yes, the code, the debug.log has been printed 10 times. Here you can see this number here. is the number of times the code has run or a debug.log has been printed. So the debug.log has been called 10 times, so it achieved the same effect. Now if we want to make some thing complex, let's say if we want to make let's create an int variable, int test number, and let's just make it equals to 0. And if we don't make it equal to 0, it will automatically be 0, so that would still be the same. And here we increase it by 1. So here we are increasing it by 1 for every time this for loop runs. For loop is called. So let's just call this for loop 100 times, and in here just debug.log our number after this for loop has been run. So when the start function will be called, it will call the for loop, and the for loop will increase the number continuously until it's less than 100. Um, and then the for loop will end and it will print our number. So now let's check it out. And let's see. And yes, it printed 100. So this means this number was increased 100 times. So every time this for loop is called, the number is increased by 1. So for loops can greatly help your code and help you write clean code with less lines. Otherwise it will get too complex if I make the number increase manually. So that's why for loops can help you greatly with your code. And now let's get to some interesting part. We will make basic component to move our player and also understand the rigid body component. So for that we are of course making a 2D game, so we have a rigid body 2D component. So comes in three types, which is dynamic, kinematic, static. I have explained more of these in the previous lecture. So the mass of the object is just the mass of it, or you can say its density, and the gravity scale is the amount of time it should fall. So if I just increase the gravity scale by 2, the object will fall twice as fast. Now if I increase the gravity scale by 2, as you can see the object falls faster. And if I just increase it by, let's say, 10, the object will fall way quickly. And let's check it out. Yes, it folded way quickly. So these are some properties. And there are also angular drag and linear drag. You shouldn't really be using these aren't used much. And here are the other properties: freeze position and freeze rotation. uh, you can freeze rotation on the z axis, but since we want the ball to rotate, that's why we aren't doing this. And then we have a circle collider on this ball, which just basically makes it collide with the platform, which also has a box collider. And if we remove or disable the circle collider, then our ball, which is our player, will just fall straight to the ground, and will just fall straight to the ground. Oops. Let's just make this gravity scale 1, and let's see. And yeah, it just falls straight to the ground. So now we want to create a new script to move this ball object. So let's create a new script. Let's go to this ball in the inspector window. uh, go down and create add a component player movement. So because this script will handle the movement of player, that's why it is named as player movement. You can name it whatever you want, but it's good to name scripts according to their functions. So how do we want to move the ball? We of course needs a speed to move the ball. So we can create a int variable for our speed, or create a float variable. The float variable gives us more control, as it allows us to use decimal points to control the speed. So we can create a float variable. Let's simply go public float speed. And I have just created a simple speed variable float, which is float, and then let's create let's wait a moment. Let's check our speed variable in the inspector, and here it is. I can increase or decrease it. I can make it go in positive and negative, and so on. And now we need another variable, which is the movement input, which will store the input of the player public. Let's call it int, and let's name it move input. So this will store the input of the player. And since we want to use rigid body to move our player, we will add a reference to the rigid body public rigid body, and we are using our rigid body 2D because we are making a 2D game. We have rigid body 2. So because we are making a 2D game, we need to use rigid body 2D. If you are making a 3D game, we can use rigid body simple rigid body. So let's create add a rigid body 2D component. This is a rigid body 2D type, and let's just name it RB. We can name it whatever you want, rigid body, whatever. RB is a short form for rigid body. And now in here, since we want to detect the input continuously from the player, we need to go into the update function, because that's where continuous things happen. To detect this input from the keyboard, we need to uh, use key input input dot get key code. So if input dot get key down. So this is basically a if statement. If statement is basically if we press the key. So basically, if we press the key, then then the code will run. If if input dot get key down, there are three types: get key up, get key, and get key down. So get key down is basically you just press a button, and it only gets called once. And get key is just like you holding a button, such as like this. If you hold a button, a get key down, it will only occur once, such as this here, like this. And get key up is when you release a button, or you stop holding it. So we need the get key down button for this. Oh wait, we need a get key. We need to use get key for this key, and then we need to use key code dot, and here we need to enter a key. We need to check. So let's add a, and then let's open the curly brackets. Oh, and we need to create another bracket in here, and okay, and that's done. So now if we press the a key, it will call this code. And let's for now just call a debug log. A key is pressed. And now if we hold the A key, it should send out the debug.log telling us that the A key is pressed. Let's hold the A key. Oh wait. So this should send out a debug.log. Let's just assign the rigid body component to it first, and let's check it out now. Okay, so the reason it didn't work is because I was opening the console window. I need to click in the game window, and now if I hold key A, it will continuously call the debug.log. Let's just put our console window in here, and as you can see, if you hold A, it will continuously send out a debug.log. But do we want to continuously call the debug.log? If we don't want to continuously call it, we can just use get key down, which we will gonna use. So if uh, get key down is true for a key, means A key is usually for moving left, means we want to move left. So we can make our move input -1. Oh, move input equals to -1. So that's it. We made our move input -1. So now our move input is -1. So if we press A key, it will be -1. And now if we press the D key is for moving right. It should be +1. And now if we press any of these keys, the move input will be 1 -1. That we have a start function and the update function. We can do our movement logic in the update function, but I recommend doing it in the fixed update function. To get the fixed update function, just get in your code outside of any function, and just type void fixed update, and it opened the fixed update function. So the fixed update function is basically just update function, or is very similar to update function, but it runs on a consistent frames, means it will not move your object based on the frames. So if we call it in the update function, the object will move fast in some devices and slow in others. To avoid that, we will use fixed update. So let's go in the fixed update and create a float named move x, which will be our movement x variable. You can name it anything again. So let's just name it move input. So this is the input. If the input is plus, the input can either be +1 and -1. And now we need our speed variable to get in use. So we will multiply this with our speed. So if our speed is 7, this move variable will be either +7 or -7. And now we need to create a new vector 2. A vector 2 is basically just a vector position. There can be vector 2 and 3. Mm, so we can again name it anything. Let's say new velocity, and we want to create a new vector 2 for it. Move x and rb dot velocity dot y. So we are creating a new vector 2, which is a new position, which is based on movement x, and our players are y position. So this is the x position and this is the y position. And now we have created the new velocity, but we haven't assigned it. So rb dot velocity equals to new velocity, and that's it. So now our ball should move. Let it give us some time to compile, and the code has compiled. And let's go in here. Also, if you are curious on how to assign the components, it's very simple. So as you can see here, our rigid body is null. uh, and if I run the code right now, it will give me error. So to fix this or assign the component, here as you can see, this dot, you can just click on it, and if it gives you the rigid body components in the scene, you can just click the one that's on your game object. um, so in my case, it's on the ball component, so I will just click on ball. And now we need some speed. Also, we can make this move input private. We don't need it to be seen in the inspector. We can do that later. So now if I make the speed 4, and let's increase the ground a bit. So let me just go in here and just scale the ground a bit. So so we have more space to move. And now let's see. If I press the D key, it will keep moving, and if I press the A key, it will keep moving left. But we don't want it to keep moving left or right. We want it to stop moving if unpress the key. Now, as I told, there are three types: get key down, get key, and get key up. So in this case, we will use get key up. So let's see, we take this piece of code and just copy it. Now we need to use get key up. So if we unpress the key, the get key up is unpressing the key. So if we unpress the key, we don't want move input to be -1 or +1, we want it to be 0. Similar for this one. Let's change the get key down with get key up and make the move input 0. So basically we are making the move input 0 when we lift up a key, and because move input is 0, the speed will be move input is 0. When it is multiplied, the move x will be 0. So move x will then be 0, and because it will 0, it will not move at all, and that's it. And now if we go back, let it save, and now let's see. And also we can check it in the inspector about the move input. Let's go in here. The move input is currently 0. Now if I make it if I press the A key, as you can see, move input is -1. I release the A key, and move input is again 0. And our ball is also rotating. If you don't want your character to rotate, you can just simply go in here on the Z on the rigid body component and freeze rotation on the Z axis. Now you can see our ball is not rotating anymore on the Z axis, so you can do that as a quick solution. But okay, so that's for the moving with uh, WASD keys. But what about we if we want to move with arrow keys as well? So for that we can just copy this code and copy this code and just use key code dot right arrow and so on. But there is another way. If we go open this bracket and just type this and an operator, so and just copy this statement and change here the key code. We want to move left, so key code dot left arrow key left. So basically this operator means either one of these conditions is true, means either A is pressed or left arrow is pressed. Both are the same. So if I press either A or left arrow, the object will move left. And we can do this similar for right. Let's just copy this and put it in here. And now we for right we want to move a right arrow, so let's just make it right arrow. So now if we go and let the code compile first, let's hit play. You can, as you can now see, I can move with arrow keys, but I can't stop with arrow keys. So that's another issue. So to stop with arrow keys, we can just copy it and just paste it here and say change the get key down to get key up. So if we lift this so if we lift the left arrow key or the D key, the input will be 0. And let's just change into key right arrow key and put dot get key up. So this operator is very useful if you want to uh, have something trigger with two or more conditions, such as with two or more conditions. For example, either if we will stop if either the player has stopped pressing the D key or the right arrow key, which both results in moving. So now if we go here and test this out, let's hit the right arrow key and here we can move. Let's unlift it and we stop it. Press the uh, press press the oh, I mean press the right arrow key now and we can move right. Press left arrow key and we can move left. Press D key, we can again move right. Press A key, we can move left, and if I unpress it, it will stop moving. So that's the simple script. Now if I remove this script, then the player will stop moving and nothing will happen because the script isn't attached to any game object, and as you can see nothing is happening. So of course there are other ways you can make player move, and let's just make this variable private because it's not needed to be shown in the inspector, uh, and let's just put it in here. Of course there are other ways you can move the player, which can be complex or more easier depending on how what kind of character you are creating, but this is really simple. We just getting some input from the player. We just have a speed variable which will determine our speed, and if I increase the speed, then let's double the speed in here. And now if I uh, hit it, and as you can see I can move really fast in here. And if I reduce it to, let's say, what, 2, I will move really slow. As you can see the ball is moving really slowly, so you can adjust the speed based on your requirements. And then we have a public rigid body component. And now if you don't want to assign the rigid body from the inspector, you can let's make this rigid body private. And now as you can see the rigid body will be disappeared from the inspector. And now how do we assign the rigid body? So to assign the rigid body, you can use the start method or any other method to assign components, and a function named get component. You can use get component to assign components. So uh, let's say RB, we want to get the component of rigid body. RB equals get component rigid body 2D. So this get component will basically get the component on this object, on this entire player. It will see if it has the rigid body 2D component and make RB equals to it. So RB will be equal to this rigid body component. So we can also do it with from an inspector or write it in the code, your choice. But continuous use of get component can be a bit laggy, which we will discuss later. But for now, you can use any of thing. You can use any method you want. So that's it for today's tutorial. If you like the video, like the video and subscribe the channel, and I will meet you in the next tutorial where we will learn more about Unity game in Gen. Goodbye.